Hi there, Calibe Thompson at the Black Enterprise Golf and Tennis Challenge. We are up in Palm Beach Gardens about to interview Mr. Alfred Edmond Jr. He is the Senior Vice President and Chief Content Officer for the entire Black Enterprise. Alfred Edmond Jr. is Senior Vice President and Chief Content Officer of Black Enterprise, a multimedia business, investing, and wealth-building resource for African Americans. He's a content leader, brand representative, and expert resource for all of the media platforms under the Black Enterprise brand. An award-winning reporter and editor, Edmond has been recognized as one of America's top influential financial journalists. He has appeared on television panels including shows at PBS, MSNBC, and CNN, and on nationally syndicated radio. Since 1983, he has held senior editor positions at a number of newspapers and magazines. During his tenure at Black Enterprise, he played a key role in the tremendous growth in circulation of the magazine and its smooth transition from print to digital content. Mr. Edmond, have you slept in the last 30 years? You were an editor straight out of college. You've been on radio, you've been running businesses, you've been expanding internet. When do you sleep?
I sleep on a regular basis. There are a lot of hit television shows I've never watched, though.
Talk about some of the highlights of your journey from being an ambitious black kid to being now at the head of one of the largest black enterprises in the world.
Well, a lot of the foundation was set when I was a kid. And I wasn't someone who necessarily knew exactly what he wanted to do. But I was artistically gifted, I was academically gifted, and my mother kind of instilled in me very early on. She had this thing that not being the best at something was not an excuse for not doing your best at something. And so I developed a kind of an early habit of not necessarily worrying about being the best, but always doing my best. And when you're committed to excellence and it becomes kind of a habit, then good things happen to you, you get opportunities, and most of the time I hit them out of the park.
So the reality is then that it's a lot of the time about your home training. So kids from the inner city who may not have the kind of access to the parenting that you would have had, are at a disadvantage. Is there anything that Black Enterprise does to help those kinds of kids?
Well, first let me make it clear. It's more about attitude than where you're from. I was raised by a divorced single mother on welfare, the oldest of 4 kids. I did not come from a privileged economic background. Mm-hmm. In a lot of ways, I've succeeded far beyond my own imagination and what would have been rightfully expected from me from my family. So and my mother's a great parent, but she parented it with a lot of disadvantages. Mm-hmm. But she always had a way of teaching me and my siblings the right attitude to approach toward things. And if you have that right attitude, then where you start has doesn't really have any limitations on where you go. And so, the way Black Enterprise, I think, embodies that is that we tell lots and lots of stories of people who you look at them now and you think, oh my God, they're amazing. Someone like Ursula Burns, who's the CEO of Xerox, came from very, very humble beginnings in New York City. But her mother told her that where you are from doesn't have to define who you are. And we tell story after story after story. And the truth is, the vast majority of people you see that are successful in corporate America, successful with businesses, successful with investing and with money, if you look at where they started from, most of them didn't start out with that much more than you did. Mm-hmm. And that's encouraging to me when you realize there's nothing really special about them that's different from you, so if they can do it, you really can do it too.
Mm-hmm. But it is special that your first job out of university was as an editor, and this came because you had already been doing it at school. We find a lot of kids and teenagers not wanting to intern or do any kind of work that seems like free work. How important is that to getting to where you want?
It was critical for me because I did not study journalism formally in college. My degree is in art. I minored in economics, but that was kind of a fluke. I never thought I'd use it. Of course, it came in handy when I got to Black Enterprise. But so when I got out of college, my resume, the part of my resume that got me my job was working for the campus newspaper for free. Mm-hmm. And even that, I kind of got dragged kicking and screaming to it, which the person who did it reminds me every day. But my editor on the paper asked me to be the chief editor after she graduated. I said no. She pretty spent a couple months bullying me into it. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And like I said, I was working for free, but it was great experience. And I knew at the end of the year running that newspaper that that's what I wanted to do, that was the feeling I wanted to have every day. It was too late to change my major, so I finished out my art degree, but got as much off-campus free experience interning and little side jobs here and there as possible, so that when I graduated, I could at least apply for journalism jobs. And started out with very small publications. That's another way I was able to become an editor, because I wasn't picky about where I was going to get my start. I started out with a very small newspaper in Brooklyn, ended up becoming the editor there at only age 24. Did that for a couple of years. That gave me a citywide platform in New York City. And then I got my first magazine job at a national magazine called Modern Black Men. And it was only a 2 or 3 year old startup magazine, but it was a national magazine. And I got to interview people like Miles Davis and then Mayor Tom Bradley of Los Angeles. And it was a great platform for me in terms of getting national exposure to what I was possible to do. And then a couple of, a year and a half later, I got hired at Black Enterprise.
And at Black Enterprise, you've held several editorial positions. Is there no, you're what, pretty close to the top of the whole food chain in that organization. Is there a secret to success? Is there a secret to success as a black man, as opposed to a secret to success for everybody?
Well, from my perspective as a black male, it starts with me seeing that as an advantage and not a disadvantage. I'm an exceptional human being, and being a black male is one of those things that makes me exceptional. So now there's a certain amount of vanity that runs in men in my family that I come by naturally, but there's nobody better to be than me. I mean, and I've always, even when I didn't have things, I always felt good about who and what I was, and saw that as an advantage and not a disadvantage. And so it's the same thing I instill in young men today. My son, other young men who I mentor, see it as an advantage, not a disadvantage, even if other people don't see it that way. If you see it that way, that's what it becomes. I already told you about my mother's teaching us to be committed to doing our best, even if we're not very good at it. But the thing is, if you habitually do your best at something, you eventually become good at it. And then the thing that I bring to it that I think it's kind of unique part of my personality is I love to learn. I love to learn. My mother used to say I'm allergic to boredom. So I've gotten good at many good things because I don't mind being bad at it in the beginning. I like the process of learning. And eventually, if you don't mind being bad at something in the beginning, you get better and better and better. And next thing you know, you're one of the best people who do it. Right. My passion for social media, I'm very active in social media since the late 90s when nobody was calling it social media. But I just like the whole idea of being able to communicate with people from all around the world from your desktop, and I never thought it would have anything to do with my work. But as it turned out a few years later, it has everything to do with your work, and that's the big part of why my career is so exciting now, because I have a certain amount of experience and passion for how social media and digital media has come together in a way that no one could have imagined. But if I didn't have a thirst for learning and a love for learning in the first place, I might not have been in a position to do what I do now as Chief Content Officer for Black Enterprise.
So what is or are there 2 or 3 books that are essential reading for you, for anybody who wants to be successful?
Ooh, I read tons of books. First of all, I'm a big believer in reading. I read at least, I just finished 2 books, but I read at least 3 books a month. That's on a slow month. I read all the time, which is another reason I don't see as much television as other people may. But there's a couple of books that really have meaning for me. First of all, I read at least 1 chapter of the Bible every single day. I'm very committed to my growth as a Christian person, and so I read the Bible, and it's not reading it just to learn the stories, but trying to find ways to apply it to my life and to be a better person, to be a better man. Then there's a couple of books that really made a difference for me. Mr. Graves' book, our founder, Earl Graves Sr., wrote a book called How to Succeed in Business Without Being White. And it encapsulates so much about who he is and what it means to work for an icon of a man who believes in family, who believes in hard work, who believes in development, who believes in young people. And the book was an encapsulation of the man that I've known now for 27 years. And that book had and has a major impact on me because I still keep it on my desk and refer to it on a regular basis. 2 other books I would probably bring up, and there's so many of them though. The Millionaire Next Door was my wake-up call to understanding what it really meant to go from making a good living and being committed to what the habits and the mentality of accumulating wealth and managing wealth responsibly, which was a big part of my development personally and professionally. And then I would probably I'm going to name two of my favorite books. One is a nonfiction and one is a fiction. I read 48 Laws of Power every 2 years.
Okay.
I just love that book. It's a beautifully designed book, but just the lessons it teaches about the way people and power and influence, even if you don't buy into everything they say, it's just beautifully written from different stories from throughout history and different examples. So I love that book. And then my favorite fiction book and my favorite fictional author is Zora Neale Hurston. So Their Eyes Are Watching God, another book I read over and over and over again.
Okay.
But that's off of a huge list of books that I love. So,
I can imagine.
Yeah.
I can imagine. And then Black Enterprise has positioned itself directly to target Black people. Why is that important in what we're supposed to be aspiring to be a post-racial United States?
First of all, I don't believe we should be aspiring to be post-racial. I think we need to aspire to be appreciative of our, there's no one word for it. I don't want you to see me as not a Black person. I want you to not hold me being Black against me. And you shouldn't have what you are as a woman held against you. It should be a universal appreciation of all that we are, and it shouldn't be limited by race. Black is the floor, it's not the ceiling of who we are. That's a starting point. So, and a lot of what I've tried to bring to Black Enterprise even over the years is to say, that Black and Black Enterprise is the starting point, because then some people are Black and Latino, some people are Black and Caribbean, some people are Black with white parentage, some people, there's a lot of places to go after you get past Black. So, but the reason why Black Enterprise is critical, because once you accept that Black means many things and it's a very, very diverse thing as the world gets smaller and as communications and culture begins to kind of collapse in on one another, then you have to face the reality that even with all that being the case, Black people in America and Black people around the world are still playing catch up from an economic standpoint in terms of access to resources, in terms of management of resources. In America in particular, because of the disruption of slavery and the cultural and economic disruption that created in terms of Africans in America. And Black Enterprise has played and continues to play a critical role in, from one generation to the next, helping us to understand what it means to gain control of resources, to manage those resources effectively, to create wealth, and then to reinvest that wealth to not only make the Black community better, but to make all communities better, to make the nation better, and now that the world is getting so much smaller, to make the world better. And when I talk about making the world better, it was an enlightened African-American business community that was the lever that finally tipped the scale in Nelson Mandela being released from prison. And by the way, helping to establish his presidency, because the first place Nelson Mandela came to when he came to America after he was released was to Black Enterprise to meet with all of the top African-American business people in America to say, you helped us politically, but if you don't help us economically, the politics will collapse. Right. You know, so when we talk about what it means, there's a thing we call the circle of wealth. The circle of wealth is not so you can have a Benz and 2 houses and a yacht. I mean, that's nice, but the circle of wealth is your capacity to invest in those things that strengthen your family, your community, the nation, and then the world. And what I mean by that is one of the things that I strive for in my personal life is that if I'm sitting in church or I'm sitting in an event and somebody says, oh, we have a kid that's about to leave school because he or she doesn't have the money to go, yeah, we can have a fundraiser, which is nice, or I could just write a check. Because I'm doing so well financially. That's one of my personal goals. I don't want to always have to organize a fundraiser. Right. I want to be able to say how much you need, young man. I mean, that's what Oprah does. That, you know, that's the kind of wealth that we need to have more of. But it's not so that I can buy me a bigger house. It's so that if I think something's important, whether it's, you know, HIV awareness, whether it's fighting cancer, whether it's creating educational opportunities, whatever it is, if I think it's important to have people in the Black community who can say, I can write that check. I can make this thing happen because I have enough power and influence and wealth to make things happen. And that's what Black Enterprise is all about. And by the way, that benefits everybody. It doesn't just benefit Black people, it benefits everybody. That we have an engaged, empowered, enriched community of people that are in a position to make a difference, as opposed to, ooh, I wish things could be better, but all I can do is like make pay, you know, I paid all my bills, I still got a roof over my head, living from paycheck to paycheck, and I wish I could help, but I can't. And that's what real empowerment is. Right.
Is there one thing that is the most important thing you think you've learned along the way?
Never stop growing. I mean, when you stop growing, you're dead. You may be still walking around. You know, there's a lot of zombies walking around here. But as soon as you stop growing, as soon as you say you don't want to know anymore, as soon as you say I'm done, even if you're still living and breathing, your body may last for another 50 years, but you're done. And I don't ever want to be done. I want to live forever from that standpoint. My body doesn't have to last forever, but I want to live forever. And all the most successful people I know, from every walk of life and from every age, they always see themselves as students. They haven't stopped learning. They're always learning new stuff. They don't become obsolete because they never get caught up in what they knew yesterday. Like, it's great that I knew that yesterday. What can I know today? And what can I be open to learn tomorrow? I was just having lunch with a good friend, former basketball player, was the MVP of the 1981 Boston Celtics championship game. His name is Cedric Maxwell. He does our play-by-play every year at our 3-on-3 tournament, and he's hilarious. But he said gave him some advice that he's passed on to me, and I repeat now: never miss the opportunity to say nothing. Meaning, most of the time when you're talking, you're not listening. Right. And when you're not listening, you're not learning. Right. So he said, never miss an opportunity to shut up and learn something. Because when you learn, you grow. And when you grow, you get better. But a lot of times we learn a certain amount and we feel good about what we learned, and then we shut off the listening part. And we start thinking we got to do all the talking and do all the teaching. And I'm a big believer, you know, if silence is golden, listening is priceless. You know, I was one of those, since I was academically gifted as a kid, I was one of those kids that could have went horribly the wrong way because I thought my value as a human being was I was smart. So I thought people wouldn't love me if I didn't bring home A's all the time. And when I got to the 3rd grade, I also got so arrogant that I didn't think I'd actually work for those A's, or E's as they call it, excellence in elementary school. And so I got arrogant by the time I was in the 5th grade, and literally was like, you know I know this stuff, I shouldn't have to do the work, give me the grade. Well, my teacher didn't quite agree. He gave me a failing grade, the first one I ever got in my life. And I threw my first big temper tantrum, first time I ever cursed, threw over desks. I went crazy. And then when I came to my senses, I realized they were about to send me home to my mother, and I was like, uh-oh. But then my next big fear was that my mother wouldn't love me anymore because I was no longer this perfect student. I got in a bad grade. And when I got home, my mother believed in capital punishment. So it wasn't like, corporal punishment. I should say capital punishment. It felt like capital punishment.
She's Jamaican, right?
No, she isn't, but she could have been. But she wasn't the spare to rob type. So I just knew I was going to get creamed when I got home. But she just sat there. She was quiet. And she pulled me to the side. And I'm like, it's even scarier because she was quiet. My mother's not a quiet woman either. So she goes, did you do your best? Is this grade the best you could do? I go, no. She goes, well, I'm never going to be mad at you for getting a poor grade, but I'm disappointed that you didn't do your best. And she just put the report card away and never mentioned it again. From that moment on, she set me free. Because then I was like, I'm not learning to get a grade. My mother is going to love me no matter what. I'm learning because I like to learn. And I've carried that lesson all the way through to now. I try all kinds of new stuff. And I'm good. I end up getting good at it because I just enjoy the process of learning. So if there's anything that I never want to ever forget, is just learn. It's okay to grow, because when you stop growing, you're dead.
Thank you, Mr. Edmond.
Oh, my pleasure.
Senior Vice President and Chief Content Officer
at
Black Enterprise Magazine. Thank you.